Hello, beautiful people. Um, I'm getting up here today to just allow things to emerge. I was trying to think what I should speak about, and I got the idea to read another one of my poems from my book. It's All in Me that I wrote a bunch of years ago for specific reasons that I may get into eventually. But if I were to kind of break down why I wrote the book, I really wrote the book as almost like breadcrumbs for me to get back to me. Because in that stage of my life, I was starting my life over again, which I've done many times. And so I was about to start this process of reinvention. I'd gotten out of the military and had just kind of come to this awareness that I value consciousness over everything. I knew that I did, but I really, really became intimate with this awareness that I value consciousness above all things in this season after I got out of the military. And I wrote this book because I also knew that there was something to be learned from the struggle, as they say, where I grew up, of being in relationship with other folks. And sometimes we make commitments for ourselves, but we're in relationships with people who don't have those same commitments or are not interested in making those kinds of commitments. And that creates some kind of struggle. Like, say, for example, that you and a friend built your relationship on Golden Corral. So y'all love going to Golden Corral and getting all you can eat. And maybe you go in the morning and you stay there all day. But you're just grubbing and grubbing and grubbing. And then one day you decide yourself that you're going to put your physical well-being on a higher plane and, a higher level of importance. And so you tell your friend, yo, you know what? I only can eat at Golden Corral for about 4 hours. I can't stay there and do an 8-hour Golden Corral grub. So then that friend's going to be like, what the heck, man? Like, our relationship was built on grubbing, and then, dot, dot, dot. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, anything like that. I'm just trying to say that if you build your relationships on a certain kind of framework and then you try to change that framework, but that other person hasn't agreed to that change, then there's going to be some tension. And that tension usually comes from a place of the ego. And so today's conversation, if you want to call it that, since it's basically me talking to a screen by myself, so it's not really a conversation yet, is ego's woes. I call it the woes of the ego. But I wrote this poem a while back in this book called Ego's Woes that kind of laid out how we get stuck in these like ego trappings and we forget our higher awareness or our consciousness or whatever the case may be. And so there's like a pattern to it. And I'm not saying that the pattern I outlined in the poem is the pattern or the only pattern, but it's a pattern. And so I'm going to share that in a moment. I'm actually waiting for at least one other person to pop up here before I start doing that poem. But I think the one of the reasons why I have been kind of deciding to unearth some of these things and try to have some conversations that center in consciousness is because I've been watching our world and watching so many of us struggling with identity issues and relationship issues and watching institutions collapse and people losing their grounding and their bearing and so many people losing their jobs. And now I saw the Supreme Court's even questioning birthright citizenship. There's a lot of things happening right now. And a lot of people, whether they're willing to admit it or not, are losing their sense of grounding. And I think the truth is that our grounding, when our grounding is in the essential awareness of who we are, the spiritual awareness of who we are, we can't lose our grounding even when things around us are swirling and swirling and swirling. And as a person who's been through many different experiences, reinvented myself a number of times, and learned to cultivate a pretty consistent sense of wonder. I want to offer to folks that maybe we've been trying to ground ourselves in the wrong thing. And for those folks who might be curious about how to ground themselves differently, I wanted to, kind of make this offering. So even though I was intending to wait until someone else popped up here before I got into the poem, I'm kind of feeling like I'm going to go ahead and do the poem now, see where this reading this takes me, and then I'll speak from that. And if anyone pops on, I'll engage. If no one pops on, hopefully some folks will look at it in the future and they'll get something out of it, but who knows? So with that being said, let me get into Ego's Woes. Here we go. I wanted to be original, but the original beat me to it. It angered me, realizing I couldn't do it. So I came up with a plan, distorted my reality. This was the way I could create myself. I knew it had to be. First step in the process, create the lie. We are all limited and born to die. Second step in the process, create the question. As fragile as we are, what will we do for our protection? Third step in the process, create the answer. Those of you who seek will find the master. Fourth step was start a rumor. There's a master in town. If you hurry up, you could probably catch him now. Fifth step was be the master. So what do you want to know? I can tell you what is and isn't so. The sixth step was to milk it for all that it was worth, not realizing what I created was a curse. Now anybody and everybody is waiting for me. Please won't somebody let me be? I don't have all the answers. I have one alone. Six steps the other way is the way to get you home. So if you're tracking, the idea behind the poem is that originally we all are kind of hanging out in this infinite consciousness, this infinite awareness that we have access to, but we only have access to it through surrender, through non-attachment to our ego idea of self, right? And so then we're hanging out in the universe, all is one, we're feeling kind of good, but then we realize that we um we can't be original. In Ecclesiastes, they say there's nothing new under the sun, because the consciousness that creates all things is the beginning and the end, the ground of all of our being. So if we're going to do things in the most intelligent way, it's only through surrender to the original. And so I don't know if that lands with folks, but that's the idea. And so the ego is like, well, I want to be original. I want to create myself. I want to be the author of my story. And so in order to be the author of one story, they have to create this separation between the intelligence of what is and whatever you make yourself to be. And then you have to actually, in creating yourself, you have to create like a series of illusions and create a series of separations that then you go through, like maybe what you want to call the hero's journey or something. And then you become a self-made person. Then you proclaim how you've made yourself. Then other people start worshiping or following you, like, oh, you made yourself. I want to make myself. And then you realize, oh, you're full of crap, right? And so then once you realize you're full of crap, you're like, well, how do I get back to that original state of being? And it's basically going back to where you started, going back to the beginning. So that's basically what the poem was about. And I think that a lot of the woes of our society right now are from us trying to create ourselves. We're basically trying to create a narrative of who we are and how we are, but we want to be responsible. And when I use that word responsible, I don't mean like in the ability to respond kind of way, but we want to be self-made people. Like one of the things we honor in America, which is the biggest lie ever. America's a lie, but what I'm about to say is a bigger lie, that we can make ourselves. Like so many people are like, oh, and they did it all on their own. They made themselves. Nobody made themselves. If you made yourself, you wouldn't have a mom or a dad. Like just starting off, you're part of something else, and then you had teachers, you had a system that enabled people to create businesses and all these other things. Like anything that anybody does is always in relationship with everything and everyone else. Even people who are protesting against other people, if they are getting some kind of recognition from it, it's because the other people are being a-holes in your opinion. So we're always in relationship. There's no way to get out of relationship, and there's no way to create ourselves, even through the tensions and all those other things. We're all kind of creating each other. The only way to get to that core essence of who you are is to surrender to the consciousness out of which all things emerge. And I think some people are afraid of doing things like that because they feel like they're going to lose themselves. And since they're trying to be their own creator, they don't want to lose themselves. You know, that's a threat that creates a lot of woes. And so where I am right now is I'm trying to stay in remembrance that, number one, I'm not my own creator, which I already know that. But that through the creator, whether you call it God, infinite intelligence, divine mind, whatever you call it, it doesn't really matter. The name is just a projection anyway. But whatever this intelligence is of which we are all a part, in which we live and move and have our being, to use some Christian parlance, uh, when we surrender to that awareness, we get to experience ourselves as we were intended to experience ourselves, which is to be wholly loved, wholly access to intelligence. And it's almost like that prodigal son story where the prodigal son, the dad was like, before he went prodigal, he was like, his dad was providing, loving him, da, 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 but he's like, yo, I want to do my own thing. I want to give me my inheritance so I can go out here and make myself. And he goes out and he tries to make himself. He tries to make it out in the world. And then he just screws the whole thing up. And then he's like, dang, I got to go back home, man, which is part of the inspiration for this poem, I should tell you. I got to go back home. So I got to go retrace my steps and go back to where I came from, because this whole idea of me creating myself with something I got from somebody else, it has failed. But then when he came back in that story, the dad wasn't like, oh, you suck, man. You wasted my money. You wasted my, no, he didn't. He just came back and was like, yo, welcome back. I love you. You're the best. You know, let's have a party. And that's basically how we are created to experience ourselves, is that awesome feeling of returning home and being like, wow, I returned home. I was celebrated. And even though I made mistakes or whatever, now I really know how much I was loved. And now I'm back. And now that I know that, I just want to celebrate that. And that sweet spot of that joy of knowing yourself as you are known is what we're created for. But we only can experience that through surrender, through realizing that we can't create ourselves. And that's a hard thing for us to do sometimes, or to think that we've been created. Because a lot of times the experiences we've had, like people harming us or the things we've been through, we think those things create us. I'm only this way because this person did this, you know, that sort of thing. But this invitation is to get to the core essence of yourself, to let go of all these woes of our ego that tell us who we are and who we can be or what we're limited to, but to get to that core essence, to remember, as I've said in previous videos, remember who you are, get back to that core essence, retrace your steps, come back to your true self, know yourself as you are known, and live more fully into how you were created to be and how you were created to experience yourself in relationship with everything. So I don't know if that's an encouragement to anybody. Maybe I just made this video for me since I'm the only one that's up here. Who knows? What I do know is that each and every one of us is beloved, whether we know we are or not. Each and every one of us belongs, whether we know that or not. And each and every one of us is safe. We are safe, even though we don't feel we are, because the core essence of who we are, the reality of who we are, can never be threatened, because it's all prior to this ego illusion of who we are, this self-made person that can also be self-destructed. So appreciate anyone who sees this. If you get something out of it, please share it, subscribe, follow, whatever the words are. If it edifies you, if it doesn't, you know, toss it. But I appreciate your future presence, if there is any. And thanks for being a part of this system. I couldn't make this video if this whole universe didn't exist. So thanks to the universe, and peace.